So I can't say for sure whether or not Space Cadet Love would qualify as Time Lord rock or not. It's definitely sort of about time, the nature of timelessness, the nature of how the now connects us with all other spaces and times. And I think if you look at the visionary art that a lot of people have brought in to our three dimensions, this stuff is sort of expressed. If you think about you not as a physical singular object, but as you as being connected through time and space, through the womb, back through the hypersymmetric movement of what appears to us as the moon, then you can kind of understand some of the visuals in the video. And there's this sort of evolution that may or may not be going on right now. This sort of change, not just to the nature of our consciousness, but also possibly to the nature of our physical structure. You look at what's happened in the past 100 years with the invention of the automobile and the fact that so many people are spending so much time sort of inside something else, inside this other form. The movie Koyaanisqatsi deals with this phenomenon, and if you look at the sped up video of the cars, they move like creatures. They move like some other form of life that we may be moving into, that we may be animating from our separate sphere. And if my suspicions are correct about this, this may have something to do with mankind's ambitions to physically travel into the heavens, into outer space. And so there is this sort of deeper metaphor with the Space Cadet Love that involves, in a sense, the insemination of the mechanism that governs, the mechanism that controls our physical reproduction. That mechanism might actually change physically, might actually shift physically, if this sort of journey actually takes place. And I don't think that this knowledge, this understanding that we have about the world, about the nature of the physical reproduction, the physics of our reproduction in biology, neglects this. It's a sort of primitive thing. The first creatures, the first cellular creatures, were not aware of their reproductive mechanisms. And it was only when man became aware of his reproductive mechanisms that he was able to take control of that. And I feel like mankind is sort of messing around with something that it doesn't really understand right now, that the actual mechanics of not just our biology, but of our physics, of the underlying physical properties, principles that govern the clockwork of our above and below relationship, might actually be changing because of these ambitions. And I guess in the sense that there might be higher forms that are pushing us to do this, that might emerge from the mechanisms from whence we came, that same sperm and egg relationship might just emerge into this sort of more cosmic insemination. The awareness of that may take a lot longer. the awareness of how these things change in time-space and how that will affect what we are physically may actually change. Maybe something that we as humans will not be able to know, but we might be able to see these sorts of changes in the observations that these artists are able to make about our behavioral changes and the changes in our relationships to the things around us. So it may be a very long time before mankind actually gets a good perspective on how these changes will manifest. But I think that what we're going to have to look is we're going to have to look outside rather than inside. When we start working with what's moving above, it's going to manifest on the outside of us. It's going to be the things in our surroundings that are changing, I believe, and in a living way. A lot of more intelligent people seem to be of the mind that the planet itself is a sort of living organism, and that we are as its cells. And from this perspective, you have to ask the question, if the planets are alive, do they reproduce? How do they reproduce if they do? And what do their sexual cells look like? And so there's a sort of life that the machines may actually take on with us being a sort of harmonic of their new forms. I think it's one of the serious problems in our culture, especially among the men in our culture, that when somebody says that they love someone else, somebody says, "I love you," sometimes it's mistaken for, "I want to have sex with you." And this is explored also in the song, and I think the finer points, the finer details about that as it relates to various sorts of sexuality probably can be sorted out fairly easily. The song is designed to resonate with lots of different people in lots of different ways, some conscious and some unconscious. I'll admit that I'm sort of working with a sort of existing form that already is resonating with people in different ways. And so the beginnings of the song itself come from that. That's where it sort of came from. It came from this sort of resonance. And if you can imagine those same forms, those same dimensions, political dimensions, mystical dimensions, sexual dimensions, amorous dimensions, fondness, there's all these emotional dimensions that a good piece of art will incorporate. And I think that's what I've intentionally done with it. I don't know what it will mean to people particularly specifically. There's no one thing or person that the song was intended for or intended to be about. So it's really strange for a change to have some song going through my head that's a song that I wrote. That is such a strange experience. It's really weird to have my own song being my favorite song right now, which is really, really strange. This is something that musical artists, I'm sure, experience, and I'm experiencing a lot of other things that are very odd, like I don't know the lyrics to my own song. How weird is that? Because usually I have no trouble memorizing lyrics to a song, after a few listens. But this is one of the most complex songs I've ever heard. And there's so many changes in it. I've put so many changes into it that I'm having trouble following it. I'm going to have to listen to it. And it's really funny that I'm going to have to listen to my own song to memorize the lyrics so that I'll be able to sing it all the way through without having to refer to a sheet with the lyrics on it. And that's a very surprising thing. I had no idea that that's what songwriters face. And I've heard stories about certain songwriters that have trouble memorizing their lyrics. I can sing a lot of other people's songs all the way through with no problem. I can sing Kashmir all the way through, no problem. Maybe someday I'll know Space Cadet Love.